The water bucket struck the dirt hard enough to split the dry crust around Martha Bell Whitaker's boots, but she was already running before the first splash darkened the dust. For one breath, the whole yard froze. Bill Hodge had been laughing with his thumbs hooked in his vest. His fine hat tipped back like the sun itself owed him money. Frank Teller had laughed because Bill laughed. Young Del Rooney had laughed too, though his laugh came thin and late, the kind a boy makes when he is afraid to be the only decent soul standing in a cruel place. They had been telling Martha she was too much woman and not enough of anything else. Too broad to marry, too stubborn to pity, too alone to keep a ranch that had taken 2 generations of Whitakers to hold against drought debt and mean neighbors. Then the stranger folded at her gate with a child in his arms. He came down like a tree cut at the root. One knee hitting first, then the other, his whole body curling over the little girl he carried, as if he could still shelter her after his strength had gone. He was dressed in buckskin gone gray with trail dust. One sleeve torn a trapper's pack hanging crooked from his shoulder, and a beard that looked like it had grown through hunger and snow. His hair was sunburned brown, his face hollow, and his eyes had that far-off mountain look of a man who had seen too much empty country and come back carrying ghosts. The child did not cry. That was what put cold through Martha on a 100-degree afternoon, a sick child too far gone to cry. "Lord have mercy," she whispered and ran harder. "Martha, don't you touch him," Bill called. "You don't know what kind of man crawls down from the high country like that." She did not slow. Her breath tore in her chest, her skirts caught on her legs. She felt the weight of herself, the heat, the ache in her knees, all the things men had made jokes about since she was 14 years old. None of it mattered. There was a child at her gate with lips cracked white and a face pale as tallow. Martha dropped to her knees in the dust beside them. "Look at me," she said to the man. "You hear me? Look up here." His head lifted by inches. His eyes were blue, but fever had burned the life from them until they looked like old glass. "Water," he said. "For you?" His arms tightened around the little girl. "Her, please. Not me. Her. You'll both drink." Martha turned her head. "Dell, bring that bucket." Nobody moved. Bill Hodge gave a little laugh, soft and poisonous. "Now, Miss Whitaker, that there's a mountain drifter, could be running from a jail, could be running from blood. A man with a knife on his belt and a child half dead in his arms don't mean safety." Martha looked at the knife, then at the child, then back at Bill. "I know what danger looks like," she said. "It's standing 10 feet away with clean hands watching a baby die thirsty." Frank shifted his boots. Dell stared at the ground. Bill's smile thinned. "You take him in, folks will talk worse than they already do. A woman alone with a wild man under her roof. You know what they'll say." Martha rose slowly. One hand braced on the gatepost. It took effort. She saw Bill notice that too, saw the old amusement waiting in him. But when she stood square. "Bill Hodge," she said, "your daddy once carried water to a Shoshone family caught in the freeze of '62. My daddy told that story every winter, said it was the finest thing he ever saw a white man do." Bill's face hardened. Martha pointed to the bucket lying in the dirt. "You going to stand there and tell me his son can't carry water 10 steps for a child?" The silence stretched. "Get the bucket," Bill muttered. The boy moved fast, then shame burning red up his neck. He brought the bucket with both hands, and Martha took it from him without thanks. She wet her fingers first and touched drops to the child's mouth. "Small sips," she murmured. "Easy now, honey. Don't you rush back to the world. It'll wait." The child swallowed once, then again. The mountain man watched as if he had been offered proof that God had not left the earth entirely. "What's her name?" Martha asked. "Lucy," he rasped. "Lucy Reed. And yours?" He blinked as though his own name had to travel a long way back to him. "Caleb Reed." "Well, Caleb Reed, I'm going to get your girl inside. I can stand." "No, you can't. I can work. Not before you live." Something in his face twisted at that pride and shame wrestling in a body too worn to hold either one. He tried to rise anyway. His legs gave, and Martha caught him under the arm, setting her whole frame beneath his weight. He was taller than she expected, all bone and hard trail muscle, but hunger had made him light in the worst way. Behind her, Bill gave a disgusted little sound. Martha did not look back. "You 3 can stand there measuring my foolishness if it pleases you. I've got living work to do." She half carried Caleb across the yard, Lucy pressed between them, the child's head lolling against Martha's shoulder. The house door stood open, dim and cool compared to the white blaze outside. Martha laid Lucy on her own bed beneath her mother's quilt and fetched broth from the back of the stove. Caleb sank to the floor by the wall, but his eyes never left the bed. "She hasn't eaten," Martha said. 2 days. His voice broke. "There was a biscuit yesterday. I gave it to her." "I know." He looked startled. "I can see it plain." Martha dipped the spoon, cooled it, and touched it to Lucy's lips. A selfish man don't arrive half dead with the last of himself wrapped around his child. For a while there was only the spoon, the swallow, the slow returning of breath. Outside, the men's voices faded, then wagon wheels creaked away. Martha did not care where they went or what story they carried. When Lucy finally slept, Caleb tried again to stand. "I saw your west fence down," he said. "Well, rope's near gone too. Point me to tools, ma'am. I'll earn what you gave her. You'll earn a grave if you keep talking foolish." "I don't take charity." "It ain't charity if I need work done and you're the one to do it. That's a wage. But today, your wage is sitting still." His jaw clenched. Why Martha looked at him. "Those men told you not to help us," he said. Any sensible woman would have shut the door. Martha's eyes went to Lucy, small beneath the quilt that had covered her own mother, once, then her father, in his dying month. "I buried my daddy alone," she said quietly. "Whole town knew. Not one man came. Since then, every door I've knocked on has shut in my face one way or another." Caleb said nothing. Martha folded the cloth beside the basin. "I have been called many things in this county, Caleb Reed, but cruel will never be one of them." His eyes lowered, wet and ashamed. She stood broad and tired and steady in the dim room. "Rest now. Tomorrow, if you can stand without the wall holding you up. We'll talk about work." Lucy stirred on the bed, her small hand opening in sleep. Without thinking, Martha placed one finger in it. The child held on. At first light, Martha Bell Whitaker woke to the sound of a knife scraping leather outside her window. For one sharp second, her whole body went still. She had slept in the chair beside the bed, boots on, shawl around her shoulders. One hand resting near the old shotgun her father had kept behind the washstand. The house was quiet except for Lucy's thin breathing beneath the quilt. But the sound outside came again, scrape, pull, twist. Not a thief's sound exactly. Too patient for that, too careful. Martha rose without waking the child and crossed to the window. Caleb Reed was at the well. The mountain man who had been near dead in her doorway the night before stood in the gray morning with his shirt hanging loose on his bones, one boot half cut apart and the well rope stretched across his knee. He had sliced a strip of leather from the boot and was binding the frayed rope with slow, stubborn hands. Every movement cost him. She could see it from the window, the tremor in his shoulders, the way he paused to breathe, the way pride alone kept him upright. Martha opened the door hard enough to make it complain. "You are a fool, man," she called. Caleb looked up. His face was pale under the sunburn, but his eyes were clearer than they had been. "Yes, ma'am. That was not an invitation to agree with me." "No, ma'am." She crossed the yard, tying her shawl tighter. The morning air still held a little coolness, but the day was already sharpening its teeth. "I told you we'd talk about work if you could stand without the wall holding you up." "I am standing. You are leaning against my well. That is a different arrangement." Martha stopped in front of him and looked down at the leather splice. It was not pretty, but it would hold. That irritated her a little because she had wanted it to be poor work so she could order him back inside with a clean conscience. "You cut up your boot. Boot had less life left than the rope. And your foot, I've got another one." She gave him a look. For the first time, something almost like humor passed over Caleb Reed's face. It was gone quick, as if he did not trust it to stay. "How's Lucy?" he asked. Martha's irritation softened before she could stop it. "Slept through. Fever broke near 3. She woke once and asked for water. His hands went still on the rope." "She spoke?" "She did. What did she say?" Martha looked toward the house. The window was open a crack, and the white curtain moved gently in the morning air. She asked if the big lady was still here. Caleb shut his eyes. "I told her yes," Martha said. "She said good." He bowed his head, and for a moment the man looked more broken by that small word than he had by hunger. Martha cleared her throat. "Finish that fool splice, then come in before you fall over. I've got eggs and she'll want to see you whole." He nodded, but his eyes stayed lowered. "Ma'am, what I have been called many things in this county, Caleb Reed, but cruel, will never be one of them." The words came out of her before she knew she meant to say them again. Maybe because his shame stood too plain between them. Maybe because she had seen men make a religion out of not needing kindness, and she was tired of worshiping at that empty altar. Caleb looked up at her then. "I didn't think you were cruel," he said quietly. I was afraid you were kind. Kindness costs more. Martha had no answer for that, so she turned back toward the house. Eggs will burn. They did not burn. Martha saw to that. She fried them in bacon grease thinned yesterday's broth and cut bread in small pieces for Lucy. The child sat propped against pillows, hair flattened on one side, eyes too large for her face. When Caleb came in, she reached for him with both arms, and he crossed the room so fast he nearly stumbled. "Papa," she whispered. "I'm here, little bird. You fixed the well. I gave it an ugly necktie." Lucy considered that solemnly, then smiled. It was a weak smile, small and cracked around the edges, but it changed the whole room. After breakfast, Lucy would not stay in bed. Martha allowed her to sit on the porch wrapped in a quilt while Caleb worked in sight of her. He moved slow, but he moved with sense. He studied the yard like a map, noticing the sag in the west fence, the dry scrape around the trough, the tracks of cattle drifting toward the draw. "2 heifers went missing," Martha said from the porch. "Red one with a torn ear." She turned to him. "How'd you know?" "Saw the tracks by the lower gate. One favors the left hind, the other follows close. They didn't wander far. They went looking for shade and water. You read dirt like print." "Better than print." Lucy giggled from the porch. "Papa can read snow too. I expect he can," Martha said. Caleb glanced at her, measuring whether she was mocking him. She was not. After a moment, he looked away. By noon, he had found the heifers in the dry draw, weak and wild-eyed. Martha watched from the ridge as he climbed down with 2 buckets, step by careful step. She wanted to tell him not to. She wanted to say the animals could wait. But she knew a man like Caleb Reed did not only work for wages. He worked to prove he had not yet been emptied of use. For 3 days, life narrowed to simple things: water, broth, fence wire, clean cloth, eggs gathered warm from the nest, Lucy's color returning by degrees, Caleb's strength coming back slower than his stubbornness. Martha kept the house running, and Caleb kept finding work that needed his hands. On the 4th morning, Lucy followed Martha to the hen house with a blanket around her shoulders. "Do chickens know their names?" Lucy asked. "Depends on the chicken. This one looks like a duchess. That one steals buttons and bites ankles. Then she is a bad duchess." Martha laughed before she could catch herself. The sound startled her. It startled Caleb, too, where he stood by the barn door mending a hinge. He looked over, and something in his face went soft enough to make Martha turn away. Later, while Lucy slept, Caleb told Martha more of Kansas. Not all of it, just enough. A wife named Sarah, a fever, a cabin high in rough country, trap lines that had once kept them fed, a rich man named Croft who held a note and called it due 3 days after Sarah was buried, a horse Caleb had bought long before the debt, men with papers, a marshal too friendly with money. That is not law, Martha said. It wore law's coat, and you ran. I carried Lucy down out of the mountains because staying meant losing her too. Martha looked toward the bed where Lucy slept with one hand curled near her cheek. "Then you did right." Caleb's mouth tightened. "Right can still make a man feel hunted." That evening, he stood in the kitchen doorway while Martha washed the supper bowls. "I owe you," he said. "More than fence work, more than wells. You name what I can do and I'll do it. Any wage, any debt, whatever I have left is yours to ask." Martha dried her hands slowly. Lucy sat on the floor nearby, making a house from kindling sticks, humming to herself. One wall leaned badly. She kept fixing it with great seriousness. Martha looked at that little bent head, at the child who had asked if she was still there, at the man who had come to her gate with nothing but a daughter and a will not yet dead. "I don't want a mountain man, Caleb Reed," she said, and her voice shook enough that she let it shake. "I want a daughter." The room went still. Caleb stared at her as if she had spoken in thunder. Martha swallowed hard. "That is the wage, if there has to be one. I want that child to have a place nobody throws her from. I want to be something she can run to. I've got more love in me than I know what to do with, and it is drowning me with nowhere to go." Lucy looked up from her crooked house. "Papa," she whispered, "can we stay?" Caleb Reed's knees gave way, but he set one hand to the table and lowered himself before he fell. He knelt there on Martha's scrubbed kitchen floor, head bowed, shoulders shaking without sound. Martha did not touch him. Not yet. Lucy rose, crossed the room, and put her small hand into Martha's big one as naturally as sunrise. Martha closed her fingers around it. Outside, somewhere beyond the yard, a wagon passed on the road and did not stop. By sundown, the story would be halfway to town. The general store went quiet the moment Martha Bell Whitaker stepped through the door. Not ordinary quiet. Not the kind that comes when folks are tired from heat and errands and the long drag of a dry year. This was the other kind, the one that drops all at once, leaving every breath in the room guilty. A dozen people had been talking a second before. Now they were looking at flour sacks, ribbon spools, boot nails, anything but her. Martha stood in the doorway with the sunlight at her back and knew. The story had arrived before she did. She could feel it sitting in the room like another person. Martha Whitaker had taken in a mountain man. Martha Whitaker had a strange man under her roof. Martha Whitaker had claimed his child like she had any right to mothering. The county had put its teeth around the tail and chewed it bloody by breakfast. She stepped inside anyway. "Morning," she said. Nobody answered. Old Pruitt stood behind the counter, one thumb tucked under his apron string, his eyes fixed too carefully on the ledger. He had been fair to her father, and mostly fair to her, which was more than she could say for most. That morning, even he looked like he wished she had gone to Sweetwater for supplies. 10 pounds flour, Martha said. Coffee if it's not burned bitter in the sack. And needles, the good ones. Pruitt began weighing the flour without meeting her eye. Miss Whitaker, that is still my name. He winced a little. A man who knew your daddy ought to say a word when there's talk. A man who knew my daddy ought to know better than to listen to it. His mouth pulled tight. Folks are concerned. Martha looked around the room. 3 women at the calico bolts pretended not to hear. 2 men near the stove stared down into cold coffee. A boy she did not know grinned at the floor. Folks have been concerned about my land, my body, my roof, my prospects, and my soul for 4 years, Martha said. It has not improved any of them. A soft laugh came from the calico bolts. Evelyn Carter stood there, holding blue cloth up to the light, her fingers white and clean, her bonnet ribbons tied just so. She had a way of looking gentle while sharpening herself. Martha knew women like that. They did not use fists because they had rooms full of silence to swing for them. Well, Evelyn said, not quite to Martha and not quite away from her. My mother always said, a woman shows her breeding by what she is willing to settle for. Martha kept her hand on the counter. Evelyn smiled at the cloth. A decent man has choices, so when some wild mountain man stays at a lonely woman's ranch, one does wonder what is wrong with him, or what is wrong with her that she has to take what falls at her gate. The room held still. Pruitt murmured, Mrs. Carter. But Evelyn had the taste of blood now. And that poor child. No mother, no proper home, only a father half savage from the hills, and a woman so hungry to be needed she'll call any stray thing family. Martha turned around slowly. Evelyn's smile flickered. A town that cannot bear to see a hungry child fed has no right calling itself decent. The words landed flat and hard. Martha did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Every person in the store heard her. Evelyn's face colored. I did not say the child should starve. No, Martha said. You only made a feast of her suffering after I fed her. A man near the stove shifted. Martha took one step closer. How is your boy Thomas 17 now? My son is none of your concern. I hope he never limps, Martha said. I hope he never goes poor. I hope he never gets scarred or fat or slow or frightened or any one of the 100 things a body can be that gives small-hearted folks permission to call him lesser. Because children learn what they live beside. Mrs. Carter, and I would hate for that boy to find out the only inheritance his mama gave him was the art of making strangers small. Evelyn's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Martha turned back to the counter. Put it on account, Mr. Pruitt. I am good for it, same as always. He tied the flour sack without a word. Martha carried it outside herself. She made it to the wagon before her hands began to tremble. She set the flour down, gripped the side rail, and stared hard at the mule's dusty back until the blur left her eyes. She would not cry in town, not for Evelyn Carter, not for any of them, ma'am. She turned. Del Rooney stood in the narrow shade between the store and the harness shop hat in both hands, twisting the brim until it near folded. He looked younger than he had at her gate, younger and frightened. What do you want, Del? I heard what you said in there. So did half the county. That seemed to be the point. No, ma'am. He swallowed. I come to tell you something. I reckon I should have told you sooner if I'd known sooner. Sheriff Pike's been getting telegrams. The street noise seemed to fall away. From who? A man in Kansas. Name of Croft. Del glanced over his shoulder. About your mountain man. Caleb Reed. Martha's fingers tightened on the wagon rail. I clean the jail Saturdays, Del said quickly. 2 bits. Pike leaves papers out sometimes. I ain't supposed to read, but I got eyes. There's reward money talked about, a warrant half wrote. Pike's waiting on one more wire to make it stand up proper, then he's coming out to your place. Martha looked at the boy who had laughed while a child lay dying at her gate. Why tell me? His face crumpled with shame before he got control of it. Because your daddy helped mine once, because you reminded Bill of water in a freeze and I've been thinking on it, because that little girl didn't look like trouble to me. She looked like my sister when she had fever. When soon, days maybe, I don't know. His voice dropped. Hodge knows too. He and Pike been talking. Dell stepped back before she could answer. Son, if anybody asks, I didn't say nothing. Then he was gone, slipping behind the shop like a rabbit into brush. Martha drove home with the sun burning white above her. By the time she reached the ranch, Sheriff Amos Pike was already in her yard. He sat his horse like judgment itself, narrow and high, his badge throwing light. Miss Whitaker, he said, heard you took in a stray. I hired a man, a mountain drifter with no history. He has a history. You just don't know it. Pike smiled without warmth. That so? Maybe I ought to. Martha stood between him and the house. Behind the curtain, Lucy's small shape moved and vanished. Caleb was at the barn, still as a rifle held level. People are talking, Pike said. A woman alone, a strange man, a child. You know how it sounds. I know how you are making it sound. His eyes hardened. Careful. Martha stepped closer to his horse. That child was starving. Her father was half dead. I fed them. If the good Christian people of this county cannot abide that, then the problem is not in my house, Sheriff. It is in the county. For a second, something like anger moved under Pike's skin. Have Reed come see me, he said. Voluntary. This week. It will look better than me coming for him. He turned his horse and rode out. That night, Martha told Caleb Pike had come asking. She told him about the talk in town. She told him Evelyn Carter's words because anger was easier to confess than fear. She did not tell him about Dell's warning. Caleb sat on the porch oiling a bridle, his face unreadable in the lamplight. She said, I was the bottom of the barrel, he asked. Martha looked away. In a manner of speaking, Caleb was quiet a long while. Lucy slept inside, one hand tucked under her cheek. When I came to your gate, he said, I was not looking for a home. I was looking for water and shade and one more day to keep Lucy breathing. That was all I had left in me. Martha did not move. Then you got down in the dirt when 3 able men would not, he said. You fed my child before you drank. You stood between us and the whole county like you had been waiting all your life for something worth standing for. His voice roughened. Evelyn Carter does not know the first thing. I have never stood higher than I do on this porch. Martha's throat tightened. You ought not say things like that to me. Why? Because I am liable to believe them. She rose before he could answer. I will start supper. The next morning, Bill Hodge came in a fine buggy with 2 hard-looking men riding behind him. Martha saw them from the porch and felt the truth she had hidden begin to crack open in her chest. Bill smiled as if he had brought flowers instead of threat. I have come to make an offer on this ranch, he said. It is not for sale. His smile stayed. Everything is for sale when the note comes due. Caleb stepped out from the barn shadow and Hodge's eyes slid to him. We will see about the mountain man, Bill said softly. Things have a way of getting decided inside a week. Martha felt Caleb looking at her. What does he mean, he asked. She closed her eyes once, then opened them. Caleb. She said, I have to tell you something, and I need you to promise me you will not run. Martha told him on the porch, while Bill Hodge's buggy dust still hung over the road. She told it fast at first, because if she slowed down, she feared her courage might give out. Del Rooney in the alley, the telegrams from Kansas, Croft's money, Pike's half-written warrant, the final wire that would turn a rich man's lie into iron. Then she told the part that cost her most, the part she had held 5 days in the locked place behind her ribs. I knew, she said, staring at her hands. I knew and did not tell you. Caleb Reed stood by the porch rail, one hand wrapped around the post until his knuckles showed pale through the brown. 5 days, he said. Yes, you knew the law might come for me. Yes, you knew if they took me, they might take Lucy. Martha flinched as though he had laid a hand across her face. Yes, and you kept it from me. I did. The wind moved over the yard, carrying the dry smell of dust and cattle and sunburned wood. Lucy was inside asleep after a morning spent following a red hen and asking questions nobody had sense enough to answer. Martha made herself look up. I did it because I knew you would run, she said. You would have packed that child in the dark and gone back to the road to spare me trouble. I could see it in you. It is the kind of man you are, and I could not wake to that bed empty. I could not be the reason Lucy lost the first safe room she has had since her mama died." Caleb's jaw worked. "I was wrong," Martha said. "It was yours to know. I sat on it like a coward, and now Hodge has come with threats and Pike may come with chains, and I have wasted time because I was afraid of being left." For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. Martha waited for anger. She almost wanted it. Anger would have been easier than the look that came into his eyes. "You are not being a coward," he said. She blinked. "You are doing what you said you would do. You refused to be another shut door. That does not make it right." "No," Caleb said softly, "but it makes it human." Martha looked away quick before her face betrayed her. "You should run now," she whispered. "Take her tonight. If Pike's paper is coming, there may still be road enough." Caleb turned and looked across the ranch. The well he had mended, the fence line he had walked in the heat. The barn where Lucy had laughed that very morning. "I have been running 2 years," he said. "From Croft. From Sarah's grave. From every place that began to feel like it might take hold of me." He faced her then. "And where did it get me? Half dead at your gate with my child fading in my arms, Caleb. No, I am done." His voice did not rise, but it settled into the boards beneath him like a nail driven clean. "If Pike has paper, let him bring it. If Croft has lies, let him send them. I will not take Lucy from the first home she has ever trusted, and I will not leave you standing alone against Hodge and his hired wolves." Martha's eyes burned. "We fight it here," he said, "together." That night they made a plan at the kitchen table in low voices while Lucy slept. Caleb remembered the bill of sale for his horse recorded in Abilene. He remembered the land note Croft had used, the appraised worth of the cabin claim, the old trap lines, the crooked judge who had signed away a poor man's life like it was a grocery bill. "There is truth somewhere," Martha said. "Law writes everything down even when wicked men hold the pen. Abilene is too far. Sweetwater is not. They have a telegraph office." Caleb stared at her. "You cannot ride that road alone. I can ride any road that has an end. It is heat enough to kill." "Then I had best not stop." He shook his head. "Martha, I'm the last person Pike will be watching. Nobody in this county has ever believed I could move fast enough to matter." Her mouth tightened. "For once, being underestimated may serve me." Before he could answer, a horse came hard up the road. Not walking, not wandering, running. Martha blew out the lamp with one breath. Caleb was on his feet. Outside, hoofbeats struck the dark fast and uneven, and beyond them, far down the road, lanterns bobbed like yellow eyes. The rider burst into the yard and nearly fell from the saddle. Miss Whittaker Del Rooney stumbled up the porch steps, hat gone, face white with terror. "They know," he gasped. "Pike knows I warned you. Hodge figured it. The wire came. The warrant is good enough for him, and they are coming tonight. Pike, Hodge. 2 hired men, maybe more. You have minutes. 10 maybe." Behind him, the lanterns climbed the road, steady and certain. Inside, Lucy's frightened voice rose from the dark. Miss Bell Caleb moved toward the bedroom, but Martha caught his arm. "Get her dressed. Quiet." "What do we do?" he asked. Martha looked at the lanterns, then at the house, then at the black shape of the yard that had belonged to her father and his father before him. All her life, darkness had been where people put their cruelty. Whispered rooms, averted eyes, men laughing at gates, papers signed where poor folks could not see them. Not tonight. "We do not run," she said. Caleb went still. Martha straightened. Light. Every lamp in the house. Every one. The porch lamp, the kitchen lamps, the barn lanterns. "I want this place bright enough for God to read by." Dell stared at her like she had gone mad. Martha stepped down into the yard. "They came in the dark because cowards do their worst in the dark, so we are going to take the dark away from them." The first lamp flared behind her, then another, then the kitchen window bloomed gold. Caleb moved through the house with quick hands. Dell, shaking, ran to the barn and struck matches until lantern light spilled across the stalls. Lucy stood in the doorway in her nightdress, clutching the frame, eyes wide and wet. By the time Pike rode through the gate, the whole ranch was blazing. The sheriff drew up first, thrown for a moment by the sight of Martha standing alone in the yard, arms at her sides, face lifted to meet him. Behind him came Bill Hodge in his fine coat, his 2 hired men and 2 townsmen wearing deputy badges that looked newly pinned. Miss Whittaker Pike said, "Step aside. I have a warrant for Caleb Reed. Read it." His jaw tightened. "I do not answer to you. You do on my land and my light at 10 o'clock at night with 6 armed men behind you." Bill Hodge made a sharp sound. For God's sake, Pike. Go get him. Martha turned her head. All I see is 6 men riding against 1 woman after dark. That is the story every soul here will carry home. The 2 deputies shifted in their saddles. Then Caleb stepped out of the lit doorway, hands open and empty. I am Caleb Reed, he said. I will not run and I will not fight, but I will hear the charge spoken. Horse theft, Pike snapped. Debt evasion. Fugitive from Kansas justice. The horse was mine, Caleb said. Bought before Croft ever held a note, and the debt was paid when he took land worth 7 times what I owed. Tell it to the judge. Pike pulled out irons. Lucy screamed. She flew from the porch and wrapped herself around Caleb's legs. Pike barked for someone to remove her. Hodge, impatient and cruel, swung down and grabbed the child's arm. Caleb moved like a mountain cat. He did not strike Hodge. He only stepped between them and removed Hodge's hand from Lucy with a grip that made the man stumble back. You do not touch her, Caleb said. One deputy spoke from his horse. He did not hit you, Bill. You grabbed the girl. Pike's face darkened, but the ground beneath him had shifted. Fine, he said coldly. We do it proper. Reed comes to jail. The child goes to county care. No mother, father in chains. That is the law. Martha felt the blade hidden inside all their paper. Lucy, she stepped forward. She is not an orphan, Martha said. She is mine. Pike turned. What? My legal ward, Martha said, her heart hammering, her voice steady. Signed and witnessed. Caleb Reed placed her under my guardianship. That child sleeps under my roof by law. It was a lie. It was the bravest lie Martha had ever told. Pike stared, weighing risk against greed. At last he spat Thursday. Bring your paper to court. If it does not exist, I will put you beside him in a cell. They chained Caleb in the lamplight. He bent as far as the irons allowed and pressed his forehead to Lucy's. Mind Miss Bell, he said. She is your family now. Then Pike took him into the dark. When the lanterns vanished, Lucy looked up at Martha with a broken face. Will they hang my papa? Martha knelt in the dust. I will tell you the truth. They could hurt him if we cannot prove the lie, but your papa is innocent, and somewhere there is paper that says so. She held the child's hands. Before dawn, I ride to Sweetwater. I will find that proof, and I will bring him home. Or I will die on the road trying. Lucy gripped her neck and whispered, Bring him home, Miss Bell. Martha held her tight. An hour before sunrise, with Lucy hidden safe at Cora Rooney's house and the false guardianship burning behind her like a borrowed match, Martha climbed onto her mule and turned toward Sweetwater. The mule did not want the Sweetwater road any more than Martha did. It stood in the gray before sunrise, with its ears laid back and its eyes half shut, as if it had already measured the distance and found the whole notion foolish. Martha tightened the cinch with fingers that did not feel like her own. She had not slept. Her dress still carried the smell of lamp smoke from the night before, and her hands still remembered Lucy clinging to them. Cora Rooney had taken the child without a question too many. The widow lived at the thin edge of town, in a house small enough that the wind seemed able to lift it, but her eyes were steady. Dell had woken her before dawn, words spilling out in shame and fear, and when Martha arrived with Lucy wrapped in a quilt, Cora opened the door wide. My boy told me enough, Cora said. I cannot tell you all of it. You do not have to. If they ask, she was never here. Cora looked down at Lucy's sleeping face. Then she was never here. Martha had wanted to say something grand, something fitting for the size of the trust she was placing in that poor little room. But her throat had closed. She only touched Lucy's hair once and left before the child woke and begged to come with her. Now the road waited. Martha climbed into the saddle with a grunt she would not have allowed another soul to hear. Her body protested at once. The mule shifted under her weight, then gave in with the offended sigh of a creature long acquainted with disappointment. All right, Martha whispered. You and me both. She turned its head east. The first miles were kind enough to lie. Morning stayed cool. The sky turned from iron to pearl, then from pearl to pale fire. Sagebrush stood black against the light. The road cut through open country where the dust had been packed hard by freight wagons and cattle drives, and for a little while, Martha could believe she had started in time, that courage and distance were the same thing. By mid-morning, the lie ended. The heat rose off the earth in sheets. It came up through the mule, through Martha's boots, through the saddle, through the bones of her. Sweat ran down her back and dried there, leaving salt to stiffen her dress. Her bonnet did little good. The sun found every place where cloth did not cover and burned it. She rationed water in small sips. Not too much, she told herself, hearing her own voice from the day Lucy came. You pour life in too fast and it comes back up. The mule plodded. A crow circled once overhead, then lost interest. Even the carrion birds, Martha thought, had better sense than to spend strength where there was none to be had. By noon, her thighs ached so sharply she had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out. The road shimmered. The horizon moved away every time she thought she had reached it. The little packet of money inside her bodice scratched against her skin, and beneath it, deeper than cloth, deeper than bone, lay the promise she had made. "Bring him home, Miss Bell." "I am," she said aloud. The mule flicked one ear. "I know you did not ask." The dry country gave no answer. Then the voices began. Not real voices. Martha knew that. They came from memory, from years stored up like bad water in a barrel. Bill Hodges' smooth cruelty, Evelyn Carter's soft poison, Frank Teller's lazy laugh, girls from long ago whispering behind church fans, men looking past her as if she were furniture too large for the room, too big, too slow, too foolish. A woman like you ought to stay where she belongs. You will die on this road, and they will say you made a spectacle of yourself doing it. Martha stopped the mule, so suddenly it tossed its head. The silence afterward rang. She sat in the saddle under the hammering sun and breathed through her mouth because her nose had gone dry and sore. For once, she did not swallow the voice. For once, she did not let it settle in and make a home. "Shut up," she said. The mule blinked. "I said shut up." Her own voice sounded cracked and strange in the empty road, but it was hers. That mattered. "I carried my father when cancer made him light as kindling. I buried him alone. I kept cattle alive in drought. I held a child while armed men came for her daddy. I stood in my own yard and lied so straight a sheriff had to step around it." Her hands tightened on the reins. "I am built for exactly this." The words came like water from a struck well deep and surprising. "I am the strongest thing this county grows, and a woman who can do all that can surely ride to Sweetwater." She kicked the mule gently. "A body can do anything if it only ever has to do the next thing." The mule walked. So did the hours. Martha did not think of the full road anymore. She thought only to the next rise, the next patch of mesquite shade, the next sip, the next breath. Once the mule stumbled and Martha slid sideways so far she nearly fell. She caught the saddle horn with both hands and laughed once, short and ugly. "Not yet," she told the ground. Near sundown, Sweetwater appeared not as a town but as a smudge of smoke, then rooftops, then the blessed straight line of a telegraph pole. Martha's heart lifted so hard it hurt. She rode directly to the telegraph office. The door was locked. For a moment, all the strength went out of her. She leaned her forehead against the sun-warmed wood and shut her eyes. Inside, somewhere beyond the front room, a lamp glowed. Martha lifted her fist and pounded. No answer. She pounded again. At last, a thin man opened the door. A cracked spectacles low on his nose, irritation drawn tight across his face. "We are closed." Martha put her boot in the gap. "I know." He looked down at the boot, then up at her ruined face. "Ma'am, I rode since before dawn from the next county. A man hangs Thursday if I do not send a wire tonight. You can open this door and take my money, or you can spend your evening arguing with a woman too tired to lose." The man stared at her. She stared back. Something in him gave way first. He opened the door. "What do you need? Sent 2 wires, Martha said, stepping inside before her knees could betray her. "First to the county clerk at Abilene Courthouse in Kansas. I need record of a bill of sale for 1 bay horse bought by Caleb Reed and the date. I need record of a debt note held by a man named Croft against Reed's land, how much was owed, and what the land was appraised at when Croft took it." The clerk began writing quickly. "Second wire," she said. "Ask if any judge, lawyer, neighbor, or clerk witnessed complaint against that taking. Anyone who can swear Croft stole under color of law. That is a great deal to ask back fast." "Then write this at the end," Martha said. "A man's life depends on the truth arriving before Thursday noon." The clerk's pencil slowed. He looked at her differently then. He sent the wires. Martha spent the night in a stable because she would not waste money on a bed. She sat against a stall door while the mule chewed nearby, and she did not sleep. Every time her eyes closed, she saw Caleb in irons, or Lucy's face asking if her papa would hang. Morning came, then heat, then waiting. She sat outside the telegraph office until the clerk brought her water without being asked. Near noon, the machine inside began to chatter. The clerk came out holding paper. Abilene answered. Martha stood too fast and nearly fell. The horse was Reed's, he said, recorded more than a year before Croft held any note. She covered her mouth. And the land, he continued, eyes grim now. Croft's note was $600. The appraisal on the land he seized was $4,200, called 3 days after Reed's wife was buried. Martha's breath broke. That is not debt, the clerk said. That is robbery dressed up for church. Can you certify it? I can certify. The wire came through true. The second answer came an hour later. A lawyer named Josiah Pennywell had filed complaint against Croft 2 years before, calling the foreclosure predatory and unlawful. The complaint had been dismissed by a judge, later removed for taking Croft's money. Martha gripped the counter. Send to Pennywell, she said. Tell him Caleb Reed is alive, jailed, and near hanging on Croft's lie. Tell him to wire Judge Harmon before Thursday noon with all he knows. She paid nearly everything she had. Then she folded the certified papers against her heart, climbed back onto the mule, and turned home. Night swallowed the road. She fell once before midnight and once after. Both times she got back on. She wept in the dark and kept moving while she wept. Coming home, she whispered with each step, I am bringing him home. When the sun rose, Thursday, town lay ahead and the courtroom bell was already ringing.